At the time of writing this, I thought I'd be burnt out from playing Elden Ring. After all, I'm still exploring the Lands Between for the first time more than 2 years after the game's release. But when the new DLC trailer dropped, I found myself racing to watch. If you're new to this channel, welcome. My name is Miquella. I host weekly streams, Soulsborne and Elden Ring lore, unboxings, and more. In this video, we dissect the new Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree story trailer.
Miquella the Kind spoke of the beginning. The seduction and the betrayal. An affair from which gold arose.
The video opens with a bangled arm, one of Marika's signature pieces of jewelry. We hear the sound of slick, sticky flesh as she digs into a cloth with blood-stained hands, pulling out golden strands. The frame cuts to a backlit figure which, by her hair, jewelry, and frame, is almost certainly Marika. From the imagery and narration, we can assume she stole these threads and the power that came with them. The strands tilt upward into an arc, which resembles the shape of the Elden Ring. Surrounding her is a horrific, towering structure of piled bodies. Even the ground Marika steps on looks and sounds like a living thing. It could even be an infant form of the Erdtree, as it's known to absorb souls after they pass on. The area closely resembles the chamber in which we find Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy. Rykard himself is composed of living body parts like these, still writhing inside of him even after being consumed. Through dialogue and item descriptions we encounter in-game, Marika is known to be an intolerant, ruthless goddess, destroying everything that stands in her way. We see this in the lore of the Omens, who she locked in the dungeons underneath Lane Dell, including her own children Morgott and Mohg. We also see this in the Misbegotten, who were emblematic of a time before the Golden Order took root. And one of the worst tragedies is what Marika did to the nomadic merchants. According to the nomadic merchants' finery, these merchants once thrived as the Great Caravan, but after being accused of heretical beliefs, their entire clan was rounded up and buried alive, far underground. Then they chanted a curse of despair and summoned the Flame of Frenzy. Knowing what Marika is capable of, it's no surprise whatsoever that, in her thirst for power, seizing these golden strands is an act of treachery. By taking the golden light, Marika cast a long shadow. This could have even marked the moment the realm of shadow was created. In front of Marika is a rift of gold, while behind her the sky is covered in gray clouds. Could this be the opening separating the Lands Between from the Land of Shadow? The trailer cuts to soldiers flanked by towering, brazier-like creatures as they lay waste to a city. They march forward, revealing burnt buildings, what looks like an impaled omen, and Messmer, who uses serpentine tendrils to burn everything in sight. Messmer the Impaler is a character we were introduced to in the recent gameplay trailer. Judging by his dialogue, it's fair to assume he's one of Marika's sons.
What followed was a war unseen. One that could never be put to song.
This statement is telling. The war was carried out in secret, its history buried as soon as the ashes cooled. And when events aren't put to song, or rather remembered, history gets lost. Because it was an unseen war, it's possible that it took place in the realm of shadow. We see the city, possibly the shadow counterpart of Lane Dell, nearby Mount Gelmir, or an entirely new area, burning below countless impaled bodies, Messmer reveling in the destruction he caused in his mother's name. All this carnage takes place underneath the strangled, shadow version of the Erdtree. Gold sap, similar to the strands that Marika stole, drips from the bowing trunk. In the scenes that follow, we see a field of golden wheat or tall grass peppered with tombstones. What could be a divine tower looms in the distance while a golden symbol stands in the foreground. In the last trailer, we were introduced to a gesture called the Ring of Miquella, a semicircle on the left-hand side of a tall stand. Is this the shape of Miquella's great rune? Reacting in what could be disgust or rejection to his mother's actions, Miquella abandoned everything. Miquella is an Empyrean, the child of Marika and Radagon. Because Marika and Radagon are alter egos, or rather two sides of the same person, their children, prodigal twins Malenia and Miquella, were cursed with two very different afflictions. Malenia was born with scarlet rot that festered throughout her body over time, while Miquella was trapped forever in the body of a child. In the lands between, we're limited to seeing parts of Miquella, the Quelaag tree which sprouted from his blood, and the egg that Mohg, Lord of Blood, stole from its womb. Miquella's body laid inside that egg completely unresponsive in what I speculate to have been a pupa state. In Elden Ring's opening cinematic, we see Mohg stealing Miquella away. His form is withered, almost boneless in his bottom half. Gossamer wings sprout out from his back. This is similar to moths and butterflies while they're still inside of a chrysalis, when their bodies undergo metamorphosis. It's speculated that Miquella sought to grow himself into a form where he could exercise his full power in order to cure Malenia of her malady. But for all the power he possessed, Malenia even calling him the most fearsome Empyrean, he still wasn't able to put a stop to the scarlet rot. And so Miquella has abandoned his own body, his consciousness residing somewhere else. To understand how Miquella can still exist without a body, I highly recommend watching Quelaag's video called Miquella Keeps Me Up at Night. Just like how Miquella's parents Marika and Radagon are the same person, it's speculated that Miquella and St. Trina are also the same. Before we move on, I'd like to note that I use he/they pronouns for Miquella and she/they pronouns for St. Trina. Miquella is a fascinating character in that, between he and St. Trina, they're also associated with fluidity between genders. According to the Sword of St. Trina, silver sword carried by clerics of St. Trina, inflicts sleep ailment upon foes. St. Trina is an enigmatic figure. Some say that she's a comely young woman. Others are sure he's a boy. The only certainty is that their appearance was as sudden as their disappearance. From this description and others like Trina's Lily, we know that St. Trina is associated with sleep. Their appearance is fleeting, like a figure from a dream. This is speculation, but Miquella could project his consciousness as an apparition. It makes me wonder whether the setting we explore in Shadow of the Erdtree is also a dream. Throughout the existing trailers, we've only seen Miquella in fleeting glimpses, blurry images, and from behind, just like the way that St. Trina is seen.
And so kindly Miquella would abandon everything. His golden flesh, his blinding strength, even his fate.
The last part of this clip is especially intriguing. When we think of others in Elden Ring who abandoned their fate as Empyreans, one familiar character comes to mind, Ranni. Early in her life, Ranni was chosen to walk the path of an Empyrean. In Elden Ring, an Empyrean is a step above being a demigod. According to Ranni, only she, Miquella, and Malenia were Empyreans, but the Black Flame ritual item description reveals that the elusive gloam-eyed queen is also known to be an Empyrean. Empyreans are chosen by their individual two fingers, capable of becoming a god presiding over a brand new age. The lands between thrives on order, and the Greater Will doesn't care about the nature of the order so long as it exists. For more on this topic, I recommend watching Smotown's fantastic video, Gloam-Eyed Queen and the Godskins. The video goes into depth about what it means to be an Empyrean and how the Greater Will craves order, regardless of whether that order is objectively good or bad. Ranni rejected her status as an Empyrean. She burned her own body beyond recognition, choosing instead to inhabit the form of a beautiful doll and usher in an age of stars. In the trailer, we see a scene where Miquella sinks, their body and hair closely resembling imagery associated with St. Trina, such as Trina's Lily and the nascent butterfly. Miquella too rejects his fate. How did he set this in motion, and what exactly were his intentions? Is Miquella a benevolent character, or is he a villain? It's well known that Hidetaka Miyazaki is a longtime fan of Berserk. There are references to the famous manga all throughout his body of work, and Elden Ring is no exception. With his androgynous features and the ability to compel favor, it's possible that Miquella was designed to resemble Griffith. Griffith, who first appears in Berserk as Guts' loyal friend and the enigmatic leader of the Band of the Hawk, turns out to be one of the most vile and twisted villains in the history of fiction. The turning point that reveals the selfishness in Griffith's intentions is the eclipse. But what does that have to do with Miquella? In the mountaintops of the Giants, we find Castle Sol. In Latin, as well as modern languages like Spanish, Sol means sun. And one of the sites of grace at this location is called the Church of the Eclipse. The area is also tied to Miquella in that, once we finally reach the top, we find the second half of the Erdtree medallion, which will take us to the secret location where Miquella founded a kingdom of his own, Miquella's Erdtree. At Castle Sol, we also find the Eclipse Shodel, which reads, "Storied sword and treasure of Castle Sol that depicts an eclipsed sun drained of color, one of the legendary armaments. In Sol, the sight of an eclipse inspires a dreadful awe, preventing an onlooker from averting his gaze. Its unique skill is called Death Flare. Set the lusterless sun ablaze with the Prince of Death's flames, inflicting the death ailment upon foes." The Shodel alludes to the Prince of Death, which presumably is Miquella's half-brother Godwyn. Godwyn was slain on the Night of the Black Knives. Although his soul is no more, his body continues to grow in a stalk of festering deathroot in the deep-root depths below Leyndell royal capital. Distraught by his brother's state of undeath, Miquella could try to tap into the power of an eclipse to usher his brother into his final rest. We see this in the golden epitaph item description. A sword made to commemorate the death of Godwyn the Golden, the first of the demigods to die. Infused with the humble prayer of a young boy. "O brother, Lord brother, please die a true death." For more about the connection between Miquella and Godwyn, my last video, Let's Talk About Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree, dives into greater depth about the lore between these two characters. Ultimately, is Miquella like Griffith? Is he an alluring figure who leads a subject to betrayal, suffering, and certain death? Let's look at their fundamental motivations. In that regard, Miquella and Griffith are actually very different. With Griffith, his single-minded dream is to have a kingdom of his own. But why? Who benefits from that? Ultimately, it's only Griffith, and he's willing to steamroll everyone in his path in order to achieve it. Conversely, Miquella's drive to create a new order is largely selfless. Many of the actions he takes are motivated by finding a treatment for his sister rather than seizing power for himself. In that way, it's clear to see he's fundamentally very different from his mother. The Scarlet Rot is a condition that's caused by the influence of an outer god. When we look at Miquella's unalloyed gold needle, which treats the Scarlet Rot in characters like Millicent, we see this. A ritual implement crafted to ward away the meddling of outer gods. It's thought capable of forestalling the incurable rotting sickness. The item is almost certainly crafted by Miquella or someone closely associated with him. Furthermore, he's called Miquella the Kind by his followers, and he's known to be sympathetic to the types of people his mother Marika wanted to eradicate, such as the Omen, the Albinaurics, and the nomadic merchants. According to the Elden Ring wiki, dialogue that Miquella was meant to say to the Tarnished reveals his acceptance of all types of life in the lands between. "If thou covetest the throne, impress my vision upon thine heart. In the new world of thy making, all things will flourish, whether graceful or malign." With any cut content, it's important to not necessarily accept it as hard canon, but it's also interesting as a way of better understanding how the developers intended certain characters to be. From this dialogue, we can glean that he aimed to create a world where no one was persecuted for who they were. However, he wields a frightening power.
Pure and radiant, he wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
Before we dissect this dialogue, let's define Shrive. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, Shrive is to administer the sacrament of reconciliation to, or to free from guilt. But what does this mean exactly? Is he purifying people from the sins they've committed in the past, or is he taking away their agency, creating a blank slate that he can control? The potential of that is indeed terrifying. This is supported by another item he's associated with, the Bewitching Branch. Tree branch blessed with an incantation of unalloyed gold. Craftable item. Pierce a foe, using FP to turn them into a temporary ally. The Empyrean Miquella is loved by many people. Indeed, he has learned very well how to compel such affection. Miquella is known for crafting items made of unalloyed gold, and for inspiring loyalty. For some, like the NPCs in the Erdtree, it's a healthy and diligent belief that Miquella is capable of bringing about a better world where they can live without fear. But for others like Moog, it's a rotten, unending obsession where he uses Miquella to try to bring about his own broken, twisted reality. The way the Bewitching Branch behaves is telling as well. By using it, a character momentarily loses their free will, joining your side and attacking your enemies, even if it means going against their allies. Their hearts, it seems, have been shrived clean. At the tail end of the trailer, we meet a new cast of NPCs who choose to follow Miquella, asking if you'll walk with them. But where is Miquella leading us to? Thank you so much for watching. I had so much fun writing and recording for this. It's been forever since I've made a video. If you would like to see more videos like this, or if you wanted to catch one of my weekly streams, feel free to subscribe. How excited are you about Shadow of the Erdtree? I'm basically bursting at the seams over it, even though I'm still playing my first playthrough of Elden Ring, but the end is in sight. I'm so excited.